Clinton campaign shared John Podesta's email account over the weekend, and among the drop, alleged transcripts of those Goldman Sachs speeches Clinton delivered before running for president. Those same speeches that Bernie Sanders had been calling on her to release during the primaries. The emails, by the way, have not been authenticated by NBC News. But to talk about it, I want to bring in Senator Chris Coons, a Democrat from Delaware and a Hillary Clinton supporter. Senator, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Hallie.
So let's talk about this release. Wikileaks, some of these supposed transcripts read, I want to pull up one full screen here, saying, what I really resent most about the obstructionists is that they have such a narrow view of America. They see America in a way that is no longer reflective of the reality of who we are. They're against immigration for reasons that have to do with the past, not the future. And then a few sentences later, she says, quote, they have to be rejected because they are fundamentally un-American. So I would pose the question to you, Senator, are people who oppose the kinds of immigration policies Clinton supports un-American?
Well, I think what Secretary Clinton meant with that piece of email, which I'll remind you hasn't been authenticated and I haven't seen until just this minute. What I think she was saying is that America's traditions, America's past in terms of our attitude about immigration has been more of a welcoming and positive one than a fearful and negative one. Seriously, Donald Trump's campaign, which began with his championing of the racist birther movement, also as a presidential candidate began with a proposal to ban all Muslims from the United States, which is unconstitutional. That may be what she had in mind, was a suggestion that blanket refusals to admit people to the United States because of their religion are certainly un-American.
Last week, Senator, I know you went on and you said essentially that you believe it is in everyone's best interest for Clinton to release the transcripts of those Wall Street speeches. Knowing what you know now after the release from Wikileaks over the weekend, do you regret making that call for more transparency?
Well, I haven't had a chance to read what was released this weekend. I'm frankly skeptical of things that are released by Wikileaks just 3 weeks before the election, given what we know about intentional actions by Russia to try and influence our election. But I do generally stand by the idea that more transparency is better, because I don't think Secretary Clinton has anything to hide. I don't think there have been bombshells in these releases so far. If there were, I'm sure you'd be asking me about them.
So should she release the rest of what else is out there, Senator?
Most of the last few weeks of this campaign have been dominated by Donald Trump's release tape in which he was bragging about sexual assault, not anything that was particularly probative or striking or new about the releases from Wikileaks.
So should she go ahead and release anything else that is left out there, Senator, in your view, do you think?
I mean, I frankly think transparency is always the better option because this sort of a daily drip, drip, drip that really doesn't amount to much other than daily coverage of the fact that there's been more released by WikiLeaks without any authentication produces steady coverage of just the fact of their release rather than the substance of their coverage. I generally think transparency is the better approach for any candidate. I still have to question why Donald Trump hasn't released his tax records. That's a transparency issue that I also think has largely dropped from coverage in this campaign and deserves equal attention.
When you talk about the drip, 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 that actually gets me to another question that I want to ask you. I want to pull up this tweet from Donald Trump earlier today in which he said that, quote, WikiLeaks proves even the Clinton campaign knew crooked, mishandled classified info, but no one gets charged. Rigged, he says. So when you talk about the drip, drip, drip of info every day, do you worry that that is damaging Hillary Clinton and playing into this narrative that Trump has begun to push that the system is in fact rigged?
Well, the most outrageous moment of the second presidential debate, in my view, was when Donald Trump called for Secretary Clinton to be jailed, threatened if he were elected to have her jailed. That reminds me more of tin pot dictators and the third world than what happens in the United States. And in my view, his this week theme that the election is rigged and that he may refuse to accept the outcome of the election is far more troubling than any suggestion that's been made so far in these steady, slow, managed leaks by a source that is, I think, arguably tied to the Russians.
So before I let you go, one on strategy, though, should Hillary Clinton, there's been a lot of talk about her expanding the map, potentially sending, as we learned this morning, Michelle Obama to Arizona to campaign for her. Is that the right move in your view, or do you worry that the campaign is kind of counting their chickens before they're hatched, if you will?
Well, I think we're seeing a great deal of enthusiasm on the ground. There's a lot of folks out there volunteering, going door to door, making phone calls, and engaged in the Democratic campaigns in the key swing states. That makes it possible for the Clinton campaign to expand the map and to now compete more actively in Missouri, in Indiana, in Arizona, in traditionally red states in presidential campaigns, where we also have promising Democratic candidates for the Senate. I think it's a good thing that the missteps of the Trump campaign, the ways in which he's demonstrated that he's simply not qualified to be president, have now expanded the map in favor of Democratic candidates.
Senator Chris Coons, thanks for joining us here. And on that topic, one of those deep red states that Hillary Clinton